Today, we're jumping into a single day in 1757 that completely redrew the map of India. We're talking about the Battle of Plassey. Now, this was so much more than just a battle. It was the moment that a trading company started its transformation into a full-blown empire. So, how on earth does that happen? Let's get into it.
Right off the bat, let's get one thing straight. The historian K.M. Panikar really hits the nail on the head with this quote. Plassey wasn't some legendary military showdown, it was a transaction, a deal, a prearranged sellout. This single idea is the key to understanding the whole story. This was a political coup bought and paid for by Bengal's own powerful elite. So, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll set the stage and look at the tensions brewing before the battle. Then, we'll dive deep into the conspiracy itself. After that, you'll see how the company flipped the script and became a government, how it funded itself through the drain of wealth, and finally, how it used that power to build its empire, the Company Raj.
Okay, so to really get Plassey, you have to picture Bengal in the mid-1700s. It was incredibly wealthy, a real prize. And where there's that much money and power up for grabs, things are bound to get tense.
You've got two major players on a collision course. On one side, the brand new Nawab, Siraj-ud-Dowlah. He's young, ambitious, and he wants to make it very clear that he's the one in charge. And on the other side, the British East India Company. And remember, this isn't just a business. It's a company with its own army, and its one and only goal is to maximize profit. These two were never going to get along.
And things started to escalate fast. The company began building up its forts in Calcutta, totally ignoring the Nawab's authority. Then there was the huge issue with the Farman, which was basically a special tax-free trading pass. The company was abusing it like crazy, which meant the Nawab's treasury was losing a ton of money. They even started protecting officials who were enemies of the Nawab. The final straw was the infamous Black Hole incident. Historians still argue about what exactly happened, but for the British, it was the perfect excuse to go on the offensive.
And this is where the story takes a sharp turn. The British response wasn't just to send in the troops. Oh no, it was way more clever than that. They decided to exploit the cracks already showing in the Nawab's own court. The battle was basically won before it even started.
So who is in on this deal? Well, you've got Robert Clive, the mastermind for the British. But he needed local partners. The biggest one was Mir Jafar, the Nawab's own top general, who was promised the throne if he switched sides. Then you have the Jagatsefs. Think of them as the richest investment bankers of their day. They worried the young Nawab would mess with their fortune, so they financed the whole conspiracy. Throw in some other key commanders and merchants, and you have a powerful group all betting against their own ruler.
So on the day of the battle, it was more like a stage play than a real fight. A massive part of the Nawab's army, led by the conspirators, just stood there. They didn't move. And then, as if on cue, a massive rainstorm hits. The British had tarps and protected their gunpowder. The Nawab's army, they didn't. All their ammo was soaked and completely useless. The betrayal was absolute, and the battle was over.
Now, winning the battle wasn't even the end game. The real prize came after. This victory didn't just put a British puppet on the throne, it completely changed what the East India Company was. Just a few years later, in 1765, the company got what it really wanted, the Diwani rights. This was a piece of paper from the Mughal emperor, and it was the ultimate game changer. It gave a foreign trading company the right to collect all the taxes and run the justice system for Bengal, the richest province in India. It was an incredible transfer of power.
And just like that, it happened. A company, accountable to shareholders in London, was now the government. Think about that for a second. They weren't just trading anymore. They were ruling. They were the state.
So what do you do when you're a company that suddenly has the power to tax millions of people? Well, you create a system to funnel that wealth back home. And that's exactly what they did. Later on, the Indian nationalist Dadabhai Naoroji gave this a name. He called it the drain of wealth. And it's a perfect description. It wasn't trade. It was a one-way pipeline, siphoning resources from India to Britain, with almost nothing coming back the other way. And we're talking about staggering amounts of money. One historian, William Digby, calculated that by the early 1900s, this drain was pulling about 30 million pounds out of India every single year. That's an almost unimaginable amount of capital being removed from an economy. So how did they pull this off? It was a brilliantly simple and absolutely ruthless system. Step 1, use your new governmental power to collect huge amounts of taxes from Indians. Step 2, use that tax money to buy Indian products, like cotton and spices. Step 3. Ship those products to Britain and sell them for a massive profit. And here's the kicker. Step 4. India gets nothing in return. The country was literally paying for its own goods to be taken away.
So what did the company do with all this cash? It invested it. It invested in its own expansion. The money taken from Bengal was used to pay for the armies and the administrators that would go on to conquer the rest of the subcontinent. It was the startup capital for an empire.
Just look at the numbers for the company's army in Bengal a few decades later. You have 70,000 soldiers. But check this out. Over 57,000 of them were Indian soldiers, sepoys. So you have an army paid for by Indian taxes, made up mostly of Indian men, being used to conquer India for the benefit of a British company? The irony is just staggering.
And to manage this growing empire, they built the hardware of control. They set up a postal service, laid down railway tracks, and dug massive canals. Now, you could say these things modernized India, and in some ways they did. But let's be real about their primary purpose. They were built to move troops faster, to get raw materials to the ports more efficiently, and to make the whole business of ruling a subcontinent much, much easier.
So that brings us full circle. The Battle of Plassey wasn't a battle. It was a business deal that led to the creation of an empire. And that leaves us with a pretty big question, one that's just as relevant today as it was 250 years ago. If a company could do all this, if it could become an empire, what does that really tell us about the incredibly thin line between commerce and power?